welcome to the second annual Indonesia Education Forum. I am Shoaib Khagda, the co-founder of the Indonesia Education Forum, and it is my honor and privilege to be your host today. We are also greatly honored to have His Excellency Bapak Nadiem Makarim, Minister of Education and Culture of the Republic of Indonesia, as our guest of honor and keynote speaker. I would like to thank the Ministry of Education and Culture, especially Dr. Iwan Sharil, for their valuable advice, inputs, and support for this forum. We would not have been able to host this year's Education Forum without the active partnership of the Ministry, and we look forward to a close working partnership going forward so as to bring best ideas, innovation, and practices to the country's education sector. I would also like to thank our partners, AWS Indonesia as our knowledge partner, SIS and Inspirasi Group of Schools, Microsoft, Intel, and Orbit Future Academy as our transformation partners, the Indonesia Economic Forum, Synthesis Communications Indonesia, Kairos International Ventures, and Cultus as our supporting partners. To say that 2020 has been a definingly disruptive year for the education sector would be an understatement. I would say that 2020 forced upon us changes that the sector would not have imagined, and in a time frame that was overnight. The changes were not just related to online learning, but in the thinking and approach to education. We could say that 2020 was the year the education sector actively started to adopt the mindset of Industry 4.0 and to fully embrace the tech revolution. What we see happening now across the world and also here in Indonesia will shape the learning experience of our students for decades to come. For more than a century, the classroom has remained fixed as the center of both teaching and learning. Students sit in rows and a teacher instructs the lesson. If a student misses a class, he or she would have to ask their friends for notes. There was no rewinding of the lesson. How times have changed. COVID-19 forced 1.2 billion children across 186 countries to sit at home and learn. Schools and universities scramble to move lessons from the physical classroom to online platforms literally overnight. Even before COVID-19, however, EdTech was growing rapidly, but the pandemic gave it a rocket boost. In 2019, global EdTech investments reached US $18 billion. In 2025, the overall EdTech market is projected to reach an astounding US $350 billion, according to the World Economic Forum. Now, whether it's language apps, virtual tutoring, video conferencing tools, or online software, we have just entered a bold new world. This huge growth in online learning will be largely led by Asia's growing youth population that is hungry for knowledge and totally at ease with technology. The question for us, however, is how do we transition from a purely physical educational setting to a virtual setting, or indeed even a hybrid setting? Many factors will determine the road ahead. And I am excited to have with us today speakers who are all experts in their fields and who can answer these questions. The brave new world of education must shape the learning outcome for the next generation of Indonesians and prepare them for the jobs of the future. We have often seen how major world events become inflection points for rapid innovation. SARS, for example, launched the e-commerce revolution. And I believe that COVID-19 will become the catalyst for the e-learning boom. What the pandemic has made clear is that learning does not stop, and the importance of disseminating knowledge across borders, sectors, companies, and indeed all parts of society. To this end, I feel that the Indonesian Education Forum is a reflection of this cross-border sharing of knowledge, as we have speakers joining us today from the United States, from India, from Europe, from Singapore, from Korea, and of course here in Indonesia. The speakers are also from diverse backgrounds and bring with them different perspectives and insights that I'm sure will enrich the discussions today. We are also honored to have the Director Generals from the Ministry of Education and Culture speaking at the forum. So to all our speakers, a huge, huge thank you from all of us at the Indonesia Education Forum for being with us and sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, but most importantly, your time today. I'm also happy to know that we have more than 1,000 registered participants for this year's Education Forum, which is a new record for us. And it illustrates two things: the huge interest in education and the power of online platforms to connect us. Lastly, I would like to note that we have with us today Nadiem Makarim. Of course, Nadiem requires no introduction. He is one of the most well-known personalities in Indonesia as one of the founders of Gojek, Indonesia's first unicorn, and probably the most well-known tech company, not just here in Indonesia, but indeed globally. With him as the Minister of Education and Culture, we may perhaps see the first ed-tech unicorn arise in Indonesia, which would be a true reflection of the confluence we see today of education and technology. In closing though, we would like to send our prayers and condolences to the families and friends of the brave soldiers who were lost in the sinking of KR Nanggala. Our prayers go out with them. We also send our prayers and our hopes to the people of India who are struggling with the devastating second wave of COVID-19. The virus has exposed just how vulnerable we are, but I have to say the response of the global community to coming to India's aid has also demonstrated the compassion and the strength of the global community. So our prayers, our hopes go out to all of these families. And in closing, I would like to say to all of us here in Indonesia and to thank the government of Indonesia for keeping us safe and our families together. Thank you for joining us today, and God bless. I would now like to invite Ilham Habibie, the co-founder of Orbit Future Academy, as our host for a very, very special session, a fireside chat with our very esteemed speaker, His Excellency, Nadiem Makarim, the Minister for Education and Culture, Republic of Indonesia. We are very honored to have him. Ilham.
Good morning.
Good morning,
This is Ilham speaking. How are you?
Thank you very much for joining us, Ilham.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, and I look forward to the conversation and discussion.
Thank you. We have our Minister, Nadiem Makarim, also online with us. Nadiem.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us here. It's a real honor and privilege to have you join us at the second annual Indonesia Education Forum. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. The honor is all mine.
Thank you. Ilham, I will leave you to take over the conversation with our Minister, Nadiem.
Thank you very much, Shoaib. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, dear Minister Nadiem Makarim, Nadiem, if I may call you that, it is my pleasure and honor to have some time to directly discuss and talk to you about very important topics in relationship to education in our beloved nation. And of course, education is one of the major critical areas that we have to do well in order to live well in the future. And before we start the conversation, I'd like to give you an outline about what kind of questions I'm going to ask. So first of all, I'd like to talk about, in general, how digital technology and the pandemic, the health situation impacts educational system right now, and how that basically leads into a way forward, among others, to the future education. And in order to achieve that future education, the Ministry for Education and Culture has launched a lot of transformation plans, and particularly one program which is quite known in Indonesia called Merdeka Belajar, which is like independent learning. And that all of that is important in order to arrive at the education of the future. And the education of the future, what we understand from what we've seen so far, will contain some very important things like 21st century skills, tech-related subjects such as computational thinking, AI or artificial intelligence, all of that. And so basically, this is the framework. So talking about, maybe we should put it the other way around. How do you see the education of the future? And how do we get there? And how do you see education right now impacted by digital and health pandemic? Now, I basically launched a sort, so this is the framework, but maybe I talk one by one. So basically, talking about what I said before, what do you think is basically, or are the transformation plans that are very important to realize the 21st century skills for all Indonesian students? What kind of transformation plans do you have as a Minister for Education and Culture? The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Ilham, and thank you for having me in this session. It's an honor to be here to speak to such distinguished people in the field of education and innovation and technology. It's a very big question about what are the plans. I've come to learn the hard way that there are no silver bullets in the education space. It's probably the space that truly doesn't have any silver bullets. You have to attack multiple problems at the same time to achieve long-lasting transformation. But I can mention kind of the highlights, right, about where do we believe the biggest return on investment of change is. In order to achieve, I just wanted to slightly correct you, Pak Ilham. I believe the better translation is not independent learning or Merdeka Belajar, it's emancipated learning. It's quite different because emancipated learning is actually the philosophy came from Ki Hajar Dewantara, which is one of the founding fathers of Indonesian education. And it is about the emancipation of the mind of the students, the emancipation of the mind of the teachers, and the emancipation of the institution of the school for it to pursue what is best for its students. And I think we get very bogged down in issues of general technical competency of teachers and curriculum debates, etc. When we are missing a fundamental rule in quality of learning, is that without autonomy, there is no learning that is happening. Without autonomy of teachers being able to choose what is best for their students, there is no learning, no matter how good or bad the teacher is. And this is a misperception, I think, in the education space. Educators have known this for a long time, especially teachers, but there seems to be an ongoing debate in education that is missing this very important factor, that without choice, there is no engagement. Without engagement, there is no critical thinking among the teachers. And without that, there's no critical thinking among the students either. And in the 21st century era, what is far more important than what is actually being taught or the subject that is being taught, far more important is the process of learning that is happening in the school itself, because the information itself is constantly evolving. The skills that is needed in industry is constantly evolving. It is futile to try to chase every single type of skill and competency that is needed in the workforce, because they will move at a pace that is forever faster than the educational institution can keep up with. So the solution has to be in the process of learning itself. How do you train the most important foundational competencies such as collaboration, teamwork, creativity, critical thinking, how to process information, problem solving, the ability to be independently driven, having a growth mindset, a love of learning. These are the most important things. Unfortunately, they're also the things that are pretty much the hardest to test on a standardized test. The things that happen to be the most important things. So we need a mental transformation. We need a mindset transformation about what education is. So now going back into Merdeka Belajar, what are the most important things that need to be changed? Well, I only have 5 years here, so the most important things have got to be the things that are foundational and have the potential to not be reversed. So the first is the assessment itself, measuring correctly what we're trying to measure. So the first thing we did is we removed the national exam. That was actually testing subject knowledge primarily across multiple subjects. And we moved that to be much more of a global standard of numeracy and literacy like PISA. And we made sure that the results only impacted what level of quality the school was at. Had nothing to do with individual teachers, had nothing to do with individual students. It was a way of measuring a snapshot of quality of learning outcomes at the school level. So one of the innovations we did was to also include a survey, a character survey there that was tied to our Pancasila values. And here is where we assess all kinds of cultural values and learning processes as well. We'll be able to assess not only numeracy and literacy, we'll be able to assess levels of radicalization, for example, experiences of bullying happening. So social and psychological issues that children are facing, sexual violence or gender issues that are being faced at the school. So we are moving towards a PISA, almost like PISA plus model and this is probably one of the largest big data projects the government is undertaking right now. We don't talk about it as a big data project because it just, to a lot of people in the education space, that term is overused, the big data term, but actually when we talk about big data, this is going to be our first big data program in the government to be able to see where is the problem, where are the numeracy problems, what are the correlations between certain programs or certain approaches to learning outcomes, where are our value gaps happening in the school. So without measuring things correctly, you're always going to be chasing the wrong thing. So that's the first thing we're going to fix. The second thing, probably the most important thing though, is the second thing, is ensuring that instructional leaders at every level are placed in the most powerful and important positions. So vice principals, principals, and superintendents or supervisors, whichever system you follow. These are people who monitor the schools. They need to be emancipated teachers. Okay, they need to be emancipated teacher leaders. So our Guru Penggerak program, the most important aspect of this is regeneration of leadership in each of the school environments and using a very, very selective criteria. Among them are, ability and comfort level with technology. Very often, Pak Ilham, being able to use technology is a very good proxy of your growth mindset, of your ability to go outside of your comfort zone and learn new things and your curiosity. And that's the kind of instructional leaders that we need. That's the kind of heads of schools, principals, and vice principals that we need. So this process of regeneration, a new species of leaders needs to emerge that are prioritizing the student instead of compliance, that are prioritizing learning instead of administration of education, that are willing to take risks, constantly willing to take risks by trying new things instead of trying to defend the status quo. I think that's the second largest program. The third is, of course, then the infrastructure itself. Digitalization of schools is our key priority here, because without that, you cannot achieve any of those changes. Those emancipated leaders cannot do work effectively without bureaucracy. They cannot personalize education and segment education. And the assessment tools will be of no use because then we cannot target and pin target key initiatives in each of them without having digital platforms that the school are using. So providing laptops, projectors, making sure with other ministries that internet connectivity is being pushed out is an extremely important part of this initiative. The fourth is we're building our own technology organization within the ministry itself. And this technology organization is really going to focus on the adults in the schools, the teachers and the principals, how to build platforms to optimize school budgets, how to build platforms so principals and teachers don't have to worry about financial reporting and administrative requirements, and automate that so that they can focus on the schools. Providing platforms for teachers to be able to custom tailor curricula to their students and do assessments to be able to see if student number one should be actually assigned the same tasks as student number two, because they're both at vastly different learning curves. It will open the doors for hybrid learning, flipped classroom models, whereby they're watching something at home and then doing problem sets with the teachers at school. It opens all kinds of personalization capabilities in the classroom environment. And more importantly, it opens self-driven learning by teachers, from teachers, by teachers. And this is the other big initiative here, is the realization that teachers learn from teachers. And the curricula and the improvements of their capabilities need to stem from hearing and being exposed to other teachers and collaborating with other teachers to actually improve their capabilities. So the entire factory of teachers, which are our teacher training programs, must evolve, but also the in-service training philosophy needs to change from academic-driven teaching to clinical-based teacher-to-teacher training and collaboration. That's, I basically mentioned the big ones. If you want me to describe the comprehensive program, it will take 2 days.
Yeah,
so
thank you very much, Nadiem. A very comprehensive and actually concise answer to what we discussed before. What I observed in your explanations is there's a lot of technology keywords that you already mentioned, like big data, and you have a technological department within your organization that focuses on exactly that. And of course, the keyword of digitalization. I have a few questions related to that, actually. So first of all, how does the experience, because I mean, Shoaib mentioned your previous background, but how does that particular experience that you already have related to technology help you in realizing those plans? And the second question would be, this is a little bit outside, but I think related, and that is that many people mention that Indonesia has a large labor pool, but a small talent pool. So how much will that transformation actually create more talent that is needed for Indonesia to achieve its goals, particularly to become a developed nation, as we always say, by 2045?
Let me try to answer the first question first. I think most people assume that my background in technology has made me be able to know how technology can impact humans, right? Before Gojek, no one would have thought that a Gojek driver could earn the same amount as a top university graduate. And so it might sound like a technology company, but why I built it was because I believed in the human potential of these drivers. And technology was the fastest way of scaling that potential to basically create, hybrid operators between human and software that could actually 10x their productivity, 10x their potential, and so on. So more importantly than actually understanding the technology, I understood the impact that technology can have in upgrading someone's capacity. Okay, the impact. So if you could do that with millions of Gojek drivers, there is no argument to be made that you cannot do that with teachers, for example, and increase their level of capability and productivity. And so I think that understanding was the biggest source of optimism that I had coming into this job. The second thing I think was actually understanding how technology operates anyway, and the rollout, understanding the power of mobile technology, knowing how to build a technology product, I think is very, very helpful, not just to create platforms within the Ministry of Education, but it also changed the philosophy of execution in the ministry, I think. And that philosophy is the not the monolithic changes that normally non-tech organizations do, but to do many different iterative processes. A lot of pilots that then get iterated and keep perfecting as they go over time, using data as a way of actually informing decision-making, using data to inform changes in policy in a much more dynamic way, instead of just standardizing everything. The natural gut instinct of government is to standardize things, and that's the diametric opposite of what we're trying to do. So we are trying to fight that bureaucratic instinct to standardize everything, but instead have technology and even in our policy making, nothing related to technology, to have that philosophy and principle of no one size fits all. I can tell you, Ilham, there is no field that needs more of the eradication of one size fits all than education. It is one of the biggest plagues in the education space, that in the effort of making it easier to measure, easier to compare, we standardize curricula, we standardize assessment, we standardize, all in the effort of making it easier to compare, to rank, etc. But this has nothing to do with learning outcomes. This is the dangerous part, right? About educational transformation. So in my mind, technology plays a pivotal role in being able to say, look, you can still measure all these things. Doesn't mean you have to standardize, right? And I think that's a powerful way of transforming what happens in the classroom over time. The final, I think, impact of coming from the technology sector is, I think, the emphasis on the dynamic within the ministry that I bring from the technology sector is quite different. I sit in on meetings constantly where my team members are, and this took a lot of cultural adjustment in the beginning, where my team members were actively shooting down my ideas. Now, for the people that have been in the ministry for a very long time, this was a novel concept of having the minister being shot down by his one downs. But this is the fundamental requirement of optimizing decision making. Without having that debate, without having the ideas of the minister being challenged by people who are better than the minister at their respective fields, you're never going to get this kind of internal transformation in the ministry. So I took that wholeheartedly from the technology sector and transplanted that in the ministry. And even though it was shocking to a lot of people that have been in the government for a long time, now they've adapted. And now the people who have been in the ministry for 30, 40 years are now attacking my viewpoints and having open debates without getting offended, without fearing me. And I'm also attacking their points in very cold ways. And out of that debate and discussion, we are far more refined in our decision-making capabilities. So don't forget, it's not just the technology know-how, it's the cultural, the corporate culture of technology companies that emphasizes openness, evidence-based debate, and transparency is a critical part that we've transplanted here. To your second question about talent versus labor pool, I think it's problematic. I think the statement is very problematic. I think we have a lot of different problems that all, people also love to have a simplistic view of education, that improving education is going to improve everything in Indonesia and then everything will be hunky-dory. And yet we have never seen, to this extent, a country that has exceeded its economic level in educational output. There is a ceiling that we have seen naturally in all countries, and that ceiling is their economic level, to how the quality of their educational system. These are all correlated. They are inseparable. It's not like suddenly a poor country can make an excellent education system and then the country becomes a rich country. That's not how it works. These are constant influencing factors that are both correlatively connected, and also causation and correlation are kind of mixed up in a messy way here between economic income and education. there's also when you hear this thing about the talent gap, etc., you're also hearing this from a very small group of high quality industry, which represents a fraction of employment in Indonesia, right? When you talk to every single technology company in Indonesia, it sounds like Indonesia's got a lot of unicorns, but those unicorns employ like the tiniest fraction of Indonesians. And from their perspective, yes, we have a massive talent gap, but their gap is a technical gap. Their gap is a critical thinking gap, right? There is also a huge amount of issues about we don't have enough industry and enough jobs for our graduates. That's nobody ever mentions that part as well. There's just not enough jobs in industry today, which is why our education system cannot just rely on getting people to get into jobs. Our education system needs to also emphasize the ability to become micro entrepreneurs on their own. You know, not everyone has to graduate and create the next unicorn. You know, people graduate, but they need to be able to create their own income, and they need to be able to create their own businesses and their own entrepreneurial ventures. And so building an educational system that is not job dependent is going to be just as important. So do we have a big talent pool? Yes, absolutely we do. Are these talent pools being prepared effectively in the educational system? No, they are not. Okay, no, they are not. So you cannot see the employers and companies in their limited interaction with job seekers are not able to see the latent talent because their potential is unrealized. They're not able to communicate effectively to an interviewer. They're not able to discuss a root cause problem solving session. They're not able to discuss around a case method because they've never experienced that before. They're not able to speak confidently to the interviewer because they've never challenged their professors or their teachers in the educational system. They have no idea about what life is like within a corporate environment because they've never simulated a corporate environment in their educational system. And then maybe when we talk about university education, you'll see that I haven't discussed university education yet, but the biggest changes there is in truly simulating what real world environments are like, and by pushing 21st century skills, by breaking the monopoly of only academic institutions can become a university. And that's really probably one of the most radical changes that we're doing in university systems to make that change. Sorry for the long rant, but those are two very big questions.
Yeah, Nadiem, I really like your answers. You said one size for all. Absolutely not. It's very true to say that the future of learning is something like, call it customized or individualized mass learning. It's mass, but it's individualized. And so every child, every person has a different way to learn. It's very true what you say. Also, I find it very interesting that before you implement the critical thinking culture in Indonesia's education system, you implement it first in your ministry. That brings very astonishing results that we can see.
Otherwise we'd be very hypocritical if we didn't apply those values in our ministry.
Yeah, it's very refreshing to hear that part. Mm-hmm. So before we go to the next big topic, which is COVID related, I'd like to ask one more thing, and that is about actually what you mentioned regarding universities. And that is, do you believe that the way to teach and learn in the future will be much more based around project-based learning rather than by discipline? Because I think that is something that if people want to be ready for what they want to do in the future, they have to work with people that are not necessarily of the same discipline. They're very different, and they have to work in an environment which is very, very plural, right? And have to do that, and clearly goal-oriented, but in a very diverse environment to achieve a particular goal or to realize a project. What about, so basically that is something to do with STEAM-based and project-based learning. How do you see that to be realized in the high school or even elementary school or leading towards university, of course?
Well, in my personal opinion, I think in universities, they should all be project-based learning.
Okay.
I don't think they should be doing anything but project-based learning. And I don't care if you're doing literature to astrophysics, okay? It doesn't matter. You need to be working collaboratively with your peers. You need to be discussing, debating, and creating real world output. Those are the skills that matter most. It's not how much you know about that particular field that is going to make the difference in that child's career, because you can learn and relearn anywhere. But the ability for that student to get used to working in teams, get used to solving real world problems, get used to being able to create something on a deadline and to present it to people and defend it to people is mission critical. I would add, there's project-based learning. I would also add kind of case-based learning or discussion-based seminars, which are, I think, just as important in training the critical thinking and building the communication skills that are important to defend your viewpoint. You know, the ideal classroom, you know, of the future should not be a quiet classroom. The classroom of the future is a very noisy classroom. And a noisy classroom whereby the students are speaking more than the teacher. A future classroom is where the professor is or the teacher is going around to these groups and providing tailored advice and support on the issues that they're facing in their projects, etc. The school of the future has no more lectures. There's absolutely zero reason for you to group a bunch of kids together just to hear someone lecture. This makes zero sense to me in today's term. When you do have a lecture, lectures are great, and they can provide huge amounts of insights. Just record them and have the kids watch it in the flexibility and safety of their own home environment. Why are you wasting quality face-to-face time by just having one-way direction discussion? This makes no sense to me. That time of interaction with the teacher needs to be spent actually answering questions, solving problems, giving direct feedback, and interactive processes, right? So I'm a firm believer in that. Project-based learning is the only way to build character-based competencies as well. How are you going to teach about empathy and tolerance when you're not interacting with people of different backgrounds? How are you going to learn about creativity when you're not forced to create a novel solution to an existing problem that has already happened if you're not appreciated for that? So absolutely, project-based learning is going to be the fundamental pillar of transformation. It also happens to be the hardest thing to assess, and the hardest thing to standardize, which makes a lot of people in the education space nervous. But we have to get past it, because actually the whole standardization is the problem. And the more that we emancipate teachers at any level of competency, no matter good teacher, bad teacher, the worst argument I've ever heard is saying, yeah, that might work for great teachers, but if you emancipate not so great teachers, they'll do a worse job. And I'm like, then you have no idea the basic mechanics of what teaching is. There is no learning that can happen when the adult in the room is not free to reflect, pursue, and choose what that is that they want to teach their student, no matter the average level of competency of the teacher. So that argument is the most, in my mind, the most uneducated argument in education, is saying that, oh, for teachers that are not so good, we should just standardize what it is that they do. And so they become a robot that cannot inflict that much damage because we're really setting their standards. This is a complete misunderstanding of how teaching works and how learning works at every level. So I just wanted to state that, because it annoys me that it's a constant mistake in the philosophy of education.
Yeah. Very good answer, sir. I'd like to switch now a little bit, very different topic, but sort of related, and that is about, of course, the pandemic. So COVID-19 has done a lot of damage to everything in the world, and digital solutions have been quite helpful for every aspect of our life, including education. So now it is planned, if I'm not mistaken, to resume face-to-face classes by, say, July. And why is it important in the ministry's view to return for school when the digital adoption is actually already happening? And what steps should schools take in order to reopen safely? In that regard, also, what kind of changes will actually last even beyond the pandemic? I mean, we are probably in a few months or years even, pandemic will not be a big issue, but some of the changes we've seen and that happened, implemented already, they're going to last. So what about that? Thank you.
Sure. Let's just be very clear that on one side, there is the benefits of technology for the education space. And then there is online learning. These are two very different things.
Right.
People confuse these two concepts. Online learning as a substitute to face-to-face learning is a subpar, suboptimal solution to learning. Let me be very clear. That debate used to be had before the pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, then every educator's instinct to say that there's no way that replacing the teacher is going to be possible by just having everyone learn independently online learning was proven 10 times fold. Huge psychological issues of kids, boredom, loss of learning. And this is globally, we're seeing this globally. Loneliness, and of course, loss of learning because of the boredom and the monotony of online learning that is just not as effective as face-to-face learning. So that debate is over, okay? Face-to-face learning is absolutely necessary, and one of the most important parts of the pandemic has been teaching people, especially people like me with background in technology, of the limits of technology in the education space, okay? That's one of the most important learnings we can derive from it. Now, having said that, what will remain? So when online learning happened, teachers, parents, and students were forced to use a variety of tools and platforms. They were forced to choose themselves what tools they wanted to use, and they started learning how to use these tools. And in this process, they discovered a whole new way of interacting, communicating, and collaborating with the stakeholders. So what will stay, I think, first and foremost, what will stay is the usage of these platforms in collaboration between teachers, parents, and students, okay? Without this triangle, learning can never be optimized, okay? I think one of the biggest learnings of the pandemic has been the dawning realization of parents that school is not just an outsourced factory that you can just send your kids and hope for the best. The pandemic has made us as parents confront the reality that we are a critical part of our children's education. And the kids that have succeeded, there's no secret to this. The kids that have succeeded in online learning are the kids whose parents care and have actually contributed. Not only care, but the parents who can afford to care, who can afford to spend the time to help their kids, right? So the differentiator between the ones that were successful are not just the teachers that they were able to adapt to technology, but were the parents present as teaching assistants at home to support online learning. So that participation of parents, I think we're entering a new era where the participation of parents due to technology is going to define this new period. Parents will become nosier. Parents will become more actively engaged in lesson plans, in seeing what their kids are up to, etc. So I think that will be a big role of technology. Thirdly is, we've only scratched the surface of what this technology can mean for teachers. The ability for teachers to access the greatest teachers around the country and internationally to see how they implement their classes. The ability for teachers anywhere to upload and share a video of what they're doing in class and receive comments and feedback about it. The ability for teachers to pick lesson plans from other teachers that are posting them online and then to adapt them to their own class. The ability for teachers to move up and down the curriculum scale, move 1 year back, 2 years up for certain groups in their class and not supported by policy is going to usher a new revolution in basically teaching at the right level and allowing the right level. Project-based learning could be enhanced significantly with technology when kids are independently pursuing their projects even outside of the classroom. And so you'll need technology to do that. So those are the lingering effects of technology. No one is going to argue today that kids should not be learning in schools. I think very, very small amount of people. It used to be bigger, yeah, but the pandemic kind of proved them wrong, that face-to-face learning is a critical component of the child's mental health, their cognitive development, their relationship building with other peers, etc. So I think those are going to be the big drives of ed tech. All the ed tech that we see right now is because it's a revenue driven, because they're all for-profit ed tech, and understandably, are basically trying to convince parents to pay for some kind of an online or AI assisted learning. We are less interested in that in the Ministry of Education. We are far more interested in the ability of technology to empower the adults in the room, to empower the principals, the teachers, to be able to create an engaging and amazing learning experience for the students. And so that's a very different way of seeing how EdTech can support education than I think a lot of the private sector players out there, which, by the way, they're doing amazing things and I love what they're doing. It's just our focus is a little bit different.
Thank you for your very good answers. Before I go to the last question I have, I'd like to re-ask actually one question that maybe you can say a few words about. What about the steps that the school should take in order to reopen safely? I think it's very important for us to understand in order to not do wrongly and basically contribute to have even more clusters of COVID-infected people in our country. What kind of steps should they take?
Sure, these steps are mandated and set by the Ministry of Health as well. So we came and supported their standards for health protocols. So it's quite standard. There are social distancing rules. Maximum capacity is 50%. There's no extracurricular activities, no assembly, no nothing. You go to school, you sit down, half your class is there, the other half is at home, and then you go back. Mask is mandatory at all times. Washing hands is mandatory at all times. All the windows are open. Outdoor classes are encouraged. And of course, thermometers, and shut down the school if there's an incidence of infection. Yeah. The key part about this is that the school, for teachers that have already been vaccinated, have an obligation that they're mandatory to open up and provide an option for in-class learning. It is not mandatory for parents to send their kids to school if they are not comfortable with. The important part of this policy is putting the power back to the parents. Right now, parents don't even have a choice. The school are not providing face-to-face options at all. So parents that whose kids are undergoing massive learning loss, who are undergoing psychological issues, loneliness issues, agitation, attention deficit issues, are now being not even given the chance to make that call and decision. It's a parent's decision at what stage, what risk they are willing to take, given the other risks that they see for their children, right? And so once the teachers of the school are vaccinated, we don't have vaccines for kids yet globally, so that's a moot point. So, but we do know that transmission rates in children are significantly less, and also severity of cases are significantly less in students. So that's the step-by-step approach of how to open schools. Ultimate choice is in the parents, but the schools are mandated to provide an offline option for the huge amount of students that are simply unable to learn from home for a variety of reasons.
Thank you very much, Pak Nadiem. Before I switch to the Q&A session with an expert panel that is already present here, a very quick question, maybe with a very quick answer. Given your vast experience, this is a little bit out of the box, given your vast experience in the private sector as such, what would be your advice to education players in Indonesia to work with your ministry to build scale for reaching high quality education to even remote parts of Indonesia, to basically have something like inclusivity? I mean, we have a big discrepancy between areas in Indonesia regarding the quality of education, and perhaps policies set by the Ministry of Education and Culture can very much help in that. And as an educational player, what can we do in order to work with your ministry to achieve that?
Are you talking about...
Very quick answer. Yeah.
Okay, I just need a clarification on that. Are you talking about private sector for-profit ed tech players, or are you talking about philanthropy organizations?
It could be
both. Those are two very different.
It could be both.
Okay, but they're on different total mechanics. So the ed tech players they have to generate revenue, so they naturally focus on more affluent areas and cities because they directly derive revenue from the parents and the students themselves. They don't really make money from the schools. But the philanthropy players are totally different. They're motivated not by profit, and so they're going out. They have a higher potential to go out to the most poorest regions in Indonesia and actually enact transformation initiatives there. I think the for-profit players have a huge amount of potential in actually creating knowledge maps that that can be used by schools and teachers as well to draw learning paths that are more optimized for every single student. I think edtech players play a huge part in innovating the content of information and knowledge. Without those edtech platforms, we wouldn't be able to do some flipped classroom models in schools. Because thanks to the Khan Academies, which are nonprofit, or the for-profit versions of Khan Academy in Indonesia, for example. It's great because teachers can tell their kids to watch certain videos and then come back to class and solve problems together. And not have to waste time re-explaining the concept. So I think that's a huge potential impact from putting all of this content digitalized. Again, the issues always come with a revenue model. The issues always come with having to focus on more middle upper class users. So I think philanthropy players can play a huge role in actually doing the predominantly offline tough job of teacher transformation in areas that need them the most.
So how do you work with your ministry in that regard? Is it more regarding the content or the model or the what is it? How education players like that could work best with your ministry, given your experience in the private sector?
We've launched one of the largest partnership programs called Program Organisasi Penggerak, where we've identified literally dozens of organizations that are doing innovative stuff, and we're helping co-funding them to do pilot projects to be able to prove what are the strategies that they're using to improve numeracy literacy in these challenging environments. So our entire philosophy is partnership. And it's also Merdeka in our not only in our thinking, Merdeka in our schools, but Merdeka in organizations pursuing different outcomes. So our university education, in case most people don't realize this, but now every single multilateral organization, every single nonprofit, every single world-class company in Indonesia can become a mini university. So we are now, the Campus Merdeka program has created space for all these world-class organizations to create a full semester within their organization that will be fully accredited, the same amount that a student would take 4 or 5 classes in a single semester. So the partnership model, which philanthropical organizations and NGOs and multilateral organizations and even edtech companies can jump in and slot in a full semester immersive project-based working experience, fully accredited for a university. So there are endless ways of participating now because we have basically unbundled education, especially in higher education. We've unbundled it and allowed all organizations and institutions to participate in an undergraduate degree or a master's degree.
Excellent. So sort of like emancipated partnering. Perhaps is a good solution to for everybody to work with your ministry, right?
Exactly.
So now I'd like to switch to the expert panel. We have, I think, in the Zoom room, basically 4 distinguished ladies and gentlemen here. And if I introduce them here, there's Dr. Rani Birchmore from Microsoft. She's responsible for Asia Pacific education industry, K-12 strategy and sales program. Then we have Mr. Gunawan Susanto, the country general manager from Amazon Web Services AWS Indonesia. And then we have Mrs. Shweta Kurana. She's a director for Asia Pacific for Global Partnership Initiative Groups from Intel Corporation out of New Delhi. And then lastly, we have Mr. Jasper Sidhu. He's the founder and chairman of Singapore International Schools and Inspirasi Group. All of them are present here, and because of the lack of time, I have to apologize, dear ladies and gentlemen. Can we just confine it to one question per person only? So maybe we start with the ladies first. Maybe I asked Mrs. Sweta to ask a question first.
Ilham,
Yes, please.
can I recommend that they ask all the questions first, and then I'll time manage to answer all the questions at once?
Good point. We do exactly like that. So maybe then I ask again Mrs. Sweta to basically ask her question first, and then maybe Dr. Rani, and then Mr. Gunawan Susanto, and lastly, Mr. Jasper Sidhu. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead.
Thank you, Ilham, and good morning. My question is, the minister spoke about the lack of jobs today and the need to create micro enterprises. So it'd be really interesting to hear about your vision on how do we move a generation in Indonesia, that's the future workforce of Indonesia, from being just technology users to becoming technology creators, specifically when it comes to emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thanks, Shweta. Then maybe Dr. Rani.
Hi, everyone. The Minister Nadiem, it was very insightful, all of the things that you had mentioned for very holistic transformation to occur. When you were talking about how do we focus on the adults, right, in the school leaders and the educators in the school, I was just trying to think about, given the global rise of learning games, such as Minecraft Education Edition, and we feel that products or solutions like that really touches quite a lot of the things you mentioned. How to flip the classroom, how to change the mindset of the teachers and students and the leaders. With that in mind, when do you believe such things will become part of Indonesia's national curriculum for primary and secondary specifically in Indonesia?
So, Mr. Jasper Sidhu, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Minister, thank you for your time. From the private sector, whatever you are saying is honestly music to my ears and music to all of us in the private sector. So I want to focus on the K-12 sector. This is where I'm operating, establishing schools throughout the country at multiple price points. So my question, Minister, is the government looking at new, innovative public-private partnership models in the K-12 sector, where we in the private sector can help raise the standards? If so, what are the specific PPP models in the K-12 sector that we want to explore? Thank you.
Thanks, Jasper. The floor is yours, Pak Nadiem. Thank you.
Okay, great questions. Excellent questions. Okay, how do we move to technology creators instead of consumers? Okay, first I have to put a caveat to this question. This is a great question. And it's kind of a key area of focus that we're doing now. Now, for countries like India or Indonesia, I just want to remind that moving to become technology producers and getting a bunch of a critical mass of software engineers, data engineers, infra cloud computing engineers, AI engineers, and so on, and designers, and so on, is fantastic for the overall productivity of the economy, okay? But it will never be a job absorber, okay? If you do the numbers in your head. So I wanna say that it is important for the sake of economic productivity. It is not, you're not going to suddenly turn 20% of your population force into programmers. This is not going to happen. So I just want to put that caveat there, but the question is an extremely good question. And what we're doing very simply to do that, to build, it's not just to build the next unicorns of Indonesia, it is to create producers of technology that will create step changes in economic efficiency across all sectors, right? We will always have an overdemand for programmers, software engineers, and the like, material designers, UX engineers, UI engineers. So the way to do this is we have two options. One, what we're doing is we're moving practitioners to teach in universities. Two, we are removing students from universities and putting them in the technology companies themselves and getting fully accredited for 20 courses. So all the unicorns in Indonesia right now are participating in the Campus Merdeka program right now to put hundreds of kids into their boot camps and then receive full 20 credits. That's the fastest way of doing it, right? It'll take you 20 years if you want to transform every single computer faculty department of a university that's been around. So until that happens, you have to do something in the meantime, which is just move the kids out of there and put them in the technology companies. And hopefully the technology companies will hire the top 10% of that batch, and then it'll be worth it. So the government is now subsidizing that process to enable all kinds of students to come into these companies and do this, to learn all these skills. So we've got Google program with Bangkit Android development. There's 3,000 kids joining this batch, and they're getting a full semester's worth of credit by doing this and only this. They don't have to do any work in their university during this immersive 4 to 5 month program, which is amazing. So we're really flipping the model of the university, and the pioneer is in the technology training space. So moving this digital talent, the fastest way is by getting the technology players to actually do this job for us and to help move and influence the universities in shifting their curriculum towards them. So in fostering the partnership. Now, if a company invests in money in a project and a university, the government will also match that using a matching fund. So we're providing every red carpet to this kind of partnership right now. And that's how you move from becoming consumers to creators. But that's not going to solve your job problem. It's a different solution. So I always want to remind people that just calculate how much 5% of Indonesia's population as engineers. There's simply not that many jobs there to be able to do it. So second point, learning games. When do you think they'll be part of the curriculum? Hopefully soon. Hopefully soon. Our entire focus, I'm sorry, can you hear me? It looks like it's lagging. My video is lagging. Sorry. The focus of computational thinking, which will influence how science and math is taught, what I've tasked my team to really focus on are in pushing computational logic. Again, a lot of people get trigger happy and say that we should all be teaching coding to our kids. I want to just slightly correct that understanding. It's not coding per se that is the important part. It is the aspect of engineering for kids that is the most important part. Engineering for kids can work through Minecraft, can work through Lego, can work through Lego robotics. It can work through any form. You don't have to learn, computer programming to understand logic. It's programming at its essence is about engineering. You're building things that work based on quantitative logic. Okay, so those kind of games is something that we want. Our focus on computational thinking, our focus on numeracy, really wants to focus on this game-based approach, project-based approach, the building, the maker-based approach. So you're going to see the beginning of this trend, hopefully during my time. But I believe that this will be, you can't block this trend. It'll be impossible. Kids will figure it out on themselves and launch an open mutiny against the classroom anyway if they're not able to do this. So it's really a fighting battle. You're not going to win, and you shouldn't be trying to win this battle because there's an amazing set of team and collaborative play-based approaches that can foster creativity and engineering skills. Yeah, when I say engineering, do I want everyone to be an engineer? No. Do I want everyone to have an engineering mindset? Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is, again, it's not about building engineers, it's not about building coders, but everyone needs to have an engineering mindset and way of deductive logic, whether they are a singer, an artist, a philosopher, or a musician. It doesn't matter. You need to have an engineering mindset to approach the problems in your life, to approach your career, and to approach the novel problems that you will experience constantly for the first time. And the third question is government looking for new public-private models. The program Indonesia Penggerak is an example. I mean, we didn't call it charter schools, but they're essentially schools that are being treated with a specific NGO program and then being observed, right? There's required funding for that as well that is supported. That's a public-private model. What I just described to you in universities is the biggest example of public-private model. We've basically allowed every single world-class organization and company to become a mini university for a full semester. I don't think you can get and funded all the students being funded by the government too. I don't think you can get any more deeper public-private partnership than that model. We are not explicitly yet creating types of partnership schools like charter school model in the US, but we're definitely considering it, right? It's a lot more complicated than most people think, because also the regulations around it is a lot also quite archaic and also complicated. So we need to get past those problems first before we can think about the pros and cons of a charter school model. We are having our own ministry version of charter school, where the ministry is now taking sekolah penggerak, about 2,000 schools this year that are going to become 50,000 schools, where we're doing the full holistic transformation treatment, except it's not the private sector, it's the people who came from the private sector who joined the ministry that is doing that implementation. So very interesting model there, where the charter is the ministry. As you know, we don't own schools, we don't run schools. So for us to actively take a more engaging role in transforming schools is already a big step forward for us in Sekolah Penggerak. So Organisasi Penggerak, Kampus Merdeka, Sekolah Penggerak, these are all examples of public-private partnerships of which we are extremely excited about. I think that's all the time I have right now. I have to take my leave, Pak Ilham. I'm so sorry.
Thank you so much, Pak Nadiem.
It's
a pleasure and honor to talk to you. Excellent discussion. I wish we could continue for much more time, but I know your time is very limited. I really like your answers, all of them, and I think there's a lot of good future ahead of us. Hopefully, we can all achieve what you and your excellent team have prepared and are executing right now. Thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye,
Take care,
sir.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, Pak. Terima
Thank you
kasih.
for having me.
Thank you so much, Pak Nadiem. That was, I think, an incredibly insightful session. I think he destroyed many myths of education on online learning, in terms of giving us real insights into his thinking on Indonesia's education sector. Pak Ilham, thank you so much for hosting this fireside chat. I think
my pleasure. Thank you, Shoaib.
I think your insightful questions really got the conversation going and the juices flowing. I hope everyone's excited and everyone's thinking hard about their role in the education sector. So thank you very much, Pak Ilham, for your time and for your insightful questions and moderating the fireside chat. Thank you.
And thanks to all the participants also.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. I think I really have to thank Pak Iwan and the team at the Ministry of Education for having us, for bringing for having us engage with Pak Nadiem. I think that was a really very good session with him to get 1 hour of his time and give us those insights into how the future of education in Indonesia is progressing.